So in the MGTOW sphere, there's a thing going around, basically, don't talk about Fight Club. And I'm wondering what the reason for this is. So in the movie, don't talk about Fight Club basically meant don't dox yourself, because if people found out that you were part of this club, it would ruin your social and financial abilities. And that's true for MGTOW to an extent. But in MGTOW, there are some other reasons why you shouldn't talk about Fight Club. Now, in MGTOW, don't talk about Fight Club basically means spread the underlying concepts of MGTOW, but don't actually say the MGTOW name itself. And to understand why, I'd like to ask you, why do MGTOW like spreading the MGTOW message? Because it's not as if we're a political movement. It's not as if we're trying to achieve some kind of change, to grow. Some of us accept donations. But I believe that the majority of the content producers out there, their goal is to improve other men's lives. We always talk about how misery loves company and how these married men try to drag you down into the same shithole that they are in. But wellness also likes company. So once we have achieved self-actualization, or once we have freed ourselves from the burdens of our societal expectations, then we like to bring other men up. And that's the reason why I believe most people like to spread MGTOW. And once you acknowledge that, then it becomes evident that you don't really need to spread the MGTOW name. You just need to spread the underlying MGTOW message. And there are three reasons why I believe you should spread the message and not the name. The first reason, as other MGTOW have probably alluded to, is that the red pill is kind of hard to digest. So if you put a label on it, if you put MGTOW on it, people are forced to take in all of the red pill at once. And this is very hard to do. However, if you were to simply feed it to them bit by bit, so firstly you start off with marriage. Marriage is a horrible idea, and you move that on to traditional expectations of men are just there to manipulate you into being a protector provider and keeping society running. These individual concepts are easy to take in. The problem is when you attach the MGTOW label to it, people are forced to take in this entire thing at once. Now, if they take in one of these, they're going to take in other parts very quickly. But it needs to be one at a time. And if you attach the label to it, you can't do it one at a time. Now, the second reason is that the MGTOW label, I believe it has already been dragged through the dirt. So there are a certain number of men, if you attach the MGTOW label, they're going to look at it and say, oh, that's a group of misogynists, of virgins, and who can't get laid. Because that's what they've heard about this movement. And they haven't actually heard about the underlying concepts. But if you just talk about the underlying concepts and don't actually give out the name, then there's no opportunity for them to associate not being able to get laid, refusing to get married. Because these are two completely different ideas that have been conflated by the mainstream media using the label of MGTOW. So they're essentially using the label against us. Now, the third reason is that it's always likely that a movement can be hijacked. And the anti-feminists allude to the idea that feminists have been hijacked, but we know that's not really the case. So I'd like to allude to a different example, namely the idea of classical liberalism. So for those of you that don't know, once upon a time, the world was ruled by the aristocracy. Basically, your worth was judged by what kind of family you were born into, and also a combination of the church. Now, the idea of liberalism is basically the idea of merit over birth. And it's embodied in people such as Abraham Lincoln, basically this poor-ass kid who found a law textbook at the bottom of a barrel. Look at Andrew Carnegie, who started off as some low-level grunt and worked his way to become, and basically built his empire for himself. And it's basically the idea that you can start anywhere in life, and you can forge your own future. And the way this manifests itself in law is the idea of property rights. And of course, you need to add in ideas of free thought and free speech to enable this to actually take place. Now, this is once upon a time what liberalism meant. It was a counter to conservative values of aristocracy and religion. But then what happened was liberalism has been hijacked, and now it means the exact opposite of what it used to mean. So now liberalism means disrespect for property rights, of big government, of taxation, of welfare, some kind of administrative class, of bureaucracy, of feelings instead of freedom of speech. So now the liberal label now means the opposite of what it used to mean. However, the ideas of freedom of speech, of property rights, of the Second Amendment, those have now been taken on by the conservatives, at least in America. So whereas the liberal name has been destroyed, the liberal ideas are still here. And these are things that will never be destroyed. And we should attempt to spread the underlying philosophy behind MGTOW of the idea of self-actualization, of forming your own future, instead of the label MGTOW. Because if we spread the label of MGTOW, then the label can always be hijacked. But the underlying concept, that is something you cannot hijack. Now, I do acknowledge there is one benefit to the label of MGTOW, namely, it puts all this information in one place. So if you come in with a red pill and you realize that marriage is not happening and long-term relationships is not happening, what do you do from there? And without the MGTOW label, then it becomes difficult to find it. But with the MGTOW label, then it becomes easy to find the next step to lead you further down the rabbit hole of self-actualization. So it allows you to find the concepts one after another smoothly. So I suppose a good compromise, you spread the red pill without the actual idea of the red pill, to take these words out of the title of the video, but then mention it at the end. Or to put these on the same channels of people who are actually making MGTOW videos, or to link them to MGTOW videos. So what they do is they watch the video without any of these labels on it, so they can take in the idea. And once they have taken in the idea, they are organically introduced to MGTOW, and somewhere along the line, they learn the label, but they learn the label after hearing the underlying philosophy. So there's no opportunity for them to attribute these labels to what they don't actually mean, and then stop listening there and not being able to find out the underlying philosophy. Of course, this only applies to borderline videos, basically where Sandman is at, basically bringing people into the manosphere. But once they've gone past the suicide valley, as it were, then yeah, why not just label these MGTOW videos so we can find other videos in the short term at least, hoping that this movement doesn't become hijacked. So those are my ideas. I don't know what other people want. Always looking for feedback. And cheers.